The Rebel Alliance was a resistance group that eventually managed to rise up and crush the Galactic Empire, defeating Palpatine and both of his planet-killing superweapons. Now, many think this is a bit of a stretch. We often see the Empire as an immeasurably huge organisation in comparison to a tiny ragtag band of heroes. So this does always beckon the question, how was the Empire actually defeated? Now, the amount of people serving in the galactic military alone must have been within the billions at the very least. And when we compare this to the Rebel Alliance, which realistically was probably a couple of million strong at best, this does seem incredibly far-fetched. However, there's actually some pretty good reasons behind how the rebels managed to gain victory. There is of course the more obvious reasons. For example, the Empire threw a lot of resources into the Death Star projects, both of which were narrowly destroyed. This essentially bankrupted the Empire not just once, but twice. As well as this, we have the fact that the Empire was a terror state, meaning that generally speaking, people didn't actually support it, so when they needed the help of the public, it didn't come. There's countless other reasons as well. However, there is one key effect that I think played in a lot more than sometimes we give it credit to, and that is the power balance within the Empire. Now, at first glance, we know that Palpatine holds basically all of the power in the Empire, and he's not really sharing it with anyone. However, he did very little ruling himself. Instead, he delegated it to an army of fanatical followers who were unquestionably loyal, many of which followed him over from the Clone Wars. These were people like Tarkin, Yularen, Thrawn, etc. Now, one of the Imperial's biggest strengths is also a significant flaw, and this is the rigid command structure, and it's very much set up like a pyramid, if you will, with Palpatine at the top, and he has a couple of underlings directly beneath him. They have a fair few more underlings directly beneath them, and then we have the masses of Imperial staff beneath them. The problem with this is that it creates focal points of power, and without these individuals, the entire power structure and Empire itself crumbles. Think about it. When we look at nearly every single story set in the Galactic Civil War, it normally follows an arc where the rebels are put up against one or numerous Imperial commanders, and after a lengthy back and forth, the rebels eventually defeat this Imperial, and said Imperial normally always dies. And this is basically how the entire war was fought. The rebels knew that fighting the Imperials directly was stupid. They'd never win. It didn't really matter how many stormtroopers they killed, how many TIE fighters they destroyed. Manpower wasn't valuable in the Empire. Realistically, for every one rebel soldier, there was probably at least 1,000 stormtroopers, if not far, far more. For this reason, it's very, very clear that the only way the rebels can win is by taking out the command structure. Because unlike standard soldiers and pilots, these were very, very valuable, and not easily replaced. You see, the problem that the Empire has is that when these higher-ups died, they left some pretty big boots to fill, because they had so much power. The Empire was very bureaucratic and slow to get things done. At the end of the day, they didn't have capable replacements ready, as anybody capable of basically taking the positions of, say, Grand Admiral Thrawn had been squashed by rivals or the very people who they were now replacing for being a potential threat. You see, for almost 20 years, the Imperial higher-ups had been working in constant power plays. Imperial staff would likely find themselves trapped behind a wall of bureaucracy, unable to progress up the ranks after a certain point, as the old guard, the Imperial higher-ups under Sidious directly, didn't want any new threats emerging, so most people's careers just stopped advancing after a certain point. The problem with this is that once these higher-ups were gone, they had no one ready to take their place, as anyone who was capable had likely had their entire career just blacklisted a long time ago. It's that very, very toxic Imperial culture that we've talked about numerous times, and it's a key factor that really hindered the Empire. Ultimately, this left very important positions in the military vacant. For example, we don't really see anyone fill Tarkin's shoes by the time the second Death Star was destroyed. There was other Grand Moffs, but no one who was capable of taking his position, especially no one who Sidious trusted. I mean, who actually commanded the Death Star? It was Sidious. The command structure the Imperials had guaranteed compliance and protected Palpatine from internal mutiny of Imperial staff. However, without these important commanders in place, we see that both Sidious and Vader found themselves developing military offensives themselves. And although Vader was definitely capable of leading, say, an army, his ability to command generals and galaxy-wide strategies were questionable. And as for Sidious, as far as I'm aware, he himself had little to no military experience. He was a schemer and a strategist. However, personally commanding the Empire's military likely wasn't his forte. When you think about it, he didn't really have that much experience in it. I can imagine somebody such as Thrawn or Tarkin probably saying that his plan for the Battle of Endor was maybe even a bad idea, and they would have probably come up with a far better strategy to destroy the rebellion than Sidious or Vader would have, because these were actual military strategists. They weren't Sith Lords, and they weren't yes-men who'd been thrown into positions that they weren't capable of fulfilling. This ultimately created a weak and fragile empire that in reality was working insanely inefficiently, commanded by those who really didn't have a clue what they were doing and unable to find talent that was capable of bringing it back around. But what do you guys think? What was wrong with the Empire's command structure, and how could it have been solved? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you for watching, I really do hope that you enjoyed. If so, please remember to like, share and sub, as it is really appreciated and it helps the channel grow. Also, don't forget to follow me on Twitter at @TheLawGuy and tick the bell for regular updates. Most importantly, thank you so much for watching. I really do hope that you enjoyed this video, and you're all having a great day, and I'll see you next time.